All right, people. So welcome back to another video in our Mitre-Attack series here. So we are going to take a look at remote services today. This is not to be confused with remote service execution. Yeah, and this is one of those very relevant techniques, and there are multiple sub-techniques. We are going to cover that. It's also when you are tasked with the implementation of a certain MITRE technique, it's a good idea to get an overview first of what it is all about. Yeah, so remote services, as you can see, we have here 8 sub-techniques. We are going to cover all of them. The tactic behind that is lateral movement, so you want to utilize remote services to connect to other parts of the network, to connect to other systems. And also remote services are usually connected to, or they are somewhat related to vulnerabilities that you can abuse and exploit. As you can see, the platforms here are the operating systems and infrastructure as a service and ESXi. So this infrastructure as a service, that's cloud. We have a contributor here, Dan Borgs from Injection. That's a good sign that somebody took credit for this work. It's a pretty old technique, 2017, so these are the early days of MITRE. And also by the number you can tell 1021, it's one of the really of the old or of the early ones. Sub-techniques you can see on the right side. So we have Remote Desktop Protocol, RDP, and we have SMB or Windows Admin Shares. So those are well-known services that are being used daily by administrators. That's why they are so attractive for the attackers, for the adversaries. And then you have here Distributed Component Object Model, DCOM. I'm not familiar with that, so I'm eager to learn what that is. I don't know what it is. Then we have SSH, obviously for Linux systems. You can connect via SSH and then just have a command prompt as if you are connected directly to the machine. VNC, I heard about that, but I'm really eager to find out more on that page. Windows Remote Management, another one of those classics, same as Remote Desktop Protocol. Windows Remote Management is what the name says. Administrators use it to change configurations on remote Windows machines. Then you have cloud services. This can be anything, and this will be ever expanding when a new cloud service comes up. Today it will be Amazon, Microsoft, Google, but there might be more in the future. And then you have here direct cloud virtual machine connections. That's a general terminology here. So whenever a VM is connecting somehow to the cloud, that is considered a remote service as well. Good. Then let's read what we have here, what we can learn about remote services in general. So adversaries may use valid accounts, and we will cover that technique as well, to log into a service that accepts remote connections, such as Telnet, SSH, and VNC. The adversary may then perform actions as the logged on users. Well, that's pretty interesting. So we have two aspects here that catch my eye. One is performing actions as the logged on user, but then here this one may use valid accounts. So obviously, in order to connect to such a service, you need to have an account already. That's where we are. That's why we are in the tactic lateral movement here. That's pretty late. Well, it's fairly in the middle of the kill chain. So the compromise, the exploit, the delivery, weaponization, all of that stuff already happened, and now it is just the idea of how to move within the network. So at that point, your attacker has a valid account likely. Okay, and then in an enterprise environment, servers and workstations can be organized into domains. Domains provide centralized identity management, allowing users to log in using one set of credentials across the entire network. Yeah, so let's mark the word domain. That's a nice learning here. So I like how educational they write it here. So, and then log in using one set of credentials across the entire network. Okay, so that's why you need a segmented network with different domains. That way, if you have different parts of the network, they need different valid accounts in order to function. But that's inconvenient for your administrator. For that reason, they will prefer not to do it like this. You as a cyber defender should recommend it though. So then if an adversary is able to obtain a set of valid domain credentials, they could log into many different machines using remote access protocols, such as Secure Shell SSH or Remote Desktop Protocol RDP. They could also log into accessible software as a service or infrastructure as a service services, such as those that federate their identities to the domain, or management platforms for internal virtualization environment, such as VMware Center. Yeah, so you can get access to a whole bunch of stuff if you have credentials. So these services are then vulnerable to things like that. The question here is, of course, and we will see that later, well, what about multi-factor authentication? Okay, so then it is difficult to obtain a valid account, more difficult at least. Then legitimate applications, such as software deployment tools and other administrative programs may utilize remote services to access remote hosts. Yes, software deployment tools, you need to log into that machine or have some sort of access. And then, for example, Apple Remote Desktop RRD or macOS is native software used for remote management. Okay, this is RRD and macOS. Okay, then ARD leverages a blend of protocols, including VNC, to send the screen and control buffers as SSH for secure file transfer. Adversaries can abuse applications such as RRD to gain remote code execution and perform lateral movement. Okay, let me think about that. So ARD and remote code execution. Well, it is a remote management tool, so yes, obviously you can execute code on that then. Okay. And then in Apple versions 1014, an adversary can escalate an SSH session to an RD session, which enables an adversary to accept TCC, transparency, consent, and control. Yeah, that I'm not familiar with. Prompts without user interaction gain access to data. Okay, so TCC prompts allow the user on the Apple platform. Most likely in your environment, Apple won't be a big issue though. So you should focus on Windows. Yes, focus on Linux, Windows, obviously on Mac OS as well, but um, it is likely that adversaries will target Windows more. Okay, let's go then to procedure examples here. So we have a group, a software, and no campaigns. So Aquatic Panda used remote scheduled tasks to install malicious software on victim systems during lateral movement actions. So those are scheduled tasks. Well, works too. Then Brute Rattle C4 has the ability to use RPC for lateral movement. Okay, so in here, MBBear, they just show you a whole bunch of hacker groups and softwares that are using this. Stuxnet can propagate via peer-to-peer communication and updates using RPC. Yeah, just an idea here who is using that stuff. And then we have here mitigations. Okay, so we have a whole bunch of mitigations. Here's multi-factor authentication, what I mentioned. Good to see it here. It's an obvious choice. But what else we have? Well, audit. You can perform audits on the systems. With audit, we don't mean a human auditing your environment. So this is about technological audit here. So you have an agent that sends audit logs to a logging and monitoring solution. That's what we are talking about here. Or you have an EDR solution that detects stuff. So auditing behavior of your machines, that's what you want. Then disable or remove features or program. Well, if you don't use certain remote access stuff, you should disable it. And here they give you some ideas on ESXi and vCenter. That's okay. Then limit access to resource over network. So prevent unnecessary remote access to file shares, hypervisors, sensitive systems, and so on, yes. And also in a segmented network. I'm surprised they don't have network segmentation here as a mitigation, but it probably is not. Yeah, I'm not sure why. But then we have password policies. That is meant to prevent valid accounts to spread too quickly over your network. So do not reuse local administrator accounts. Yes. So then it is the impact, the attack surface is much smaller than if one password gets out somewhere. And then user account management. So limit the permissions for accounts as usual. So if you don't need sudo access on your Linux machine, don't use it. Stuff like that. As a result of that, the adversary can also not get easily their hands on such privileged accounts. Whenever you use an account or log in, by the way, that's the critical moment where the credentials might be stolen by some sort of vulnerability, some sort of exploit. And that's why the less often you log into these highly privileged accounts, the lesser the probability that somebody steals it. All right then, so let's go now to detection strategy. So here you have behavior detection, once again, for remote service logins and post-access activity. Yes, so there's some behavior, remote login, and after the login, something happens. Let's see what it is. So first is logon via RDP or WME by a user account, followed by uncommon command execution. Well, that's what you always have, some uncommon stuff. And we will have that all the time. Privilege escalation is here. Well, interactive shell privilege escalation, look out for that. These shells, they are always very suspicious. Here you have something with Apple that's that won't be too relevant, let's say. Even if you don't detect that Apple stuff here, it won't break your neck. Usually focus on Windows, Linux. Here you have something again, followed by commands that initiate outbound. So again, you are supposed to track executed commands. And here you have again, followed by unauthorized shell commands. Okay, this is the stuff that you have to look out for. So I've been asked, what is the target group of this whole Mitre-Attack series here? Well, obviously, people who are tasked to implement a detection for remote services T1021. Well, this is a good starting point, right? So you might watch a video like this just as a starting point to implement a certain technique in Mitre. Further, if somebody tells you, hey, we cover, so there's like a service provider, you want to buy the service or so, it's security related, and they tell you, yes, we have remote services technique covered. And then they present you a long list with all the Mitre techniques that they have covered. Well, pick one of those at random, it doesn't matter. Then go to this detection strategy on the Mitre website and ask them to show you these detection strategy steps, if they are implemented or not. Because if somebody claims that they cover Mitre-Attack, it means they implemented this detection strategy and not some random stuff that is called remote services. No, ask them and let them show you, okay, do they have RDP? Do they have the Apple stuff? If you claim you have this Mitre ID, remote services, if you claim that you have covered that, it means you fully covered the detection strategy here. And it means you fully covered the mitigation. I just jumped back one step. And I can tell you most of them don't. So they just read remote services and they mapped it to something on their side that does a little bit with remote service. That's how it works in real life. So yes, use this this content that I provide here to challenge your service providers and uncover all of these fraudulent cases where people claim that they cover Mitre-Attack with their security solution, but in reality they only cover a very tiny little bit of that. Usually they just want here, they want the Mitre stamp on their solution, because that looks then like a like a quality sign. But it's not enough to just put the Mitre stamp on your solution. You've got to implement that. Okay, so far so good to the detection topic and to the question, who is the target audience of these videos? Well, detection and security engineers who are tasked, and also project managers who are tasked with the implementation and oversight of cybersecurity defense, officer roles as well. Okay, let's take a look at the references. So this is a full list. We have 17. So you have ssh.com. This is just explaining you, I guess, how that stuff works. Microsoft Remote Desktop Service, also explanation. Then you have Apple explanation on remote management, another Apple. Is there red teaming stuff, CrowdStrike, threat hunting report? Yeah, that's we might read the one from 2025. They usually have those, but that's a valuable source. Let's mark it down. Not specifically the older ones, but yeah, so they have one every year as far as I know. Or the state of cybersecurity, they call it usually. Okay, what else do we have? Microsoft Threat Intelligence. So Cadet Blizzard. So again, a Russian threat actor here. Yeah, nothing catches my eye so much. Broadcom, enabling or disable lockdown mode on an ESXi host. Well, that's not security, that's just how you are supposed to manage your stuff. Here, that's interesting. Look at this. Detection, containment, and hardening opportunities for privileged guest operations. Anomalous behavior and VMCI backdoors. Retrieved 2025, fairly recent. That thing, Alex Mavi, Greg Blom, and Ron Kraft. That catches my eye. The title is good and it is not too old, so we might want to check this out too. As usual, let me know if any of these sources catch your eye. We will cover them. Let me know in the comments. But for now, so far so good, people. So we have an understanding now what remote services are all about. We have the sub-techniques here. We know that it's in a lateral movement, and also we have an idea of the affected platforms here. We've seen some procedures. There are many more for sure. So remote services are used by a lot more hacker groups and softwares. We have an idea how to mitigate it. Take this to your company as a little homework and just ask your administrators, your security personnel, ask them if they have all of this stuff enabled. You have some detection ideas, so go to your SOC, go to your service provider for security. If they claim they covered this, even if they don't claim, that's another idea. Just ask them, hey guys, I recently read about remote services, so it might be a good idea to cover that. And of course, there's no reason to disagree. Obviously, it's a good idea to cover that. And yeah, some sources here as well. So, as usual then, thank you for watching. Thank you for spending time on cybersecurity. It is always time well spent. And see you in the next video then. Goodbye.